I sat here trying to think of a proper way to start the poison type intro, but I sat here in front of a screen for an hour straight struggling. But I guess we can now talk about the type that loses to Steel, which is one of the most common types and then beats Fairy, but Fairy also loses to Steel. Man, they really went and made Steel that good, huh? And that's pretty much all I got for you. Leave what type you want to see next in the comments below. Quick honorable mention to Galarian Weezing. For being a physical wall with Defog, Will-O-Wisp, and Pain Split, it's pretty good. Alolan Muck is just an overall solid mon. Dark and Poison will always be a good type combination. Stab Knockoff, with Poison Touch as an ability so it doesn't even have to run Toxic, and access to a rather despicable Curse, Drain Punch, and Knockoff set, or a solid Assault Vest set, put Shadow Sneak somewhere in the mix? Yeah, this Pokemon definitely has the capabilities of getting the job done. It isn't the greatest, but it's solidly reliable. I like the Curse set myself, because with its already good special bulk, it becomes not too hard to get a Curse off with Leftovers or Black Sludge as a means of recovery. Now, Alolan Muck in Global Challenge VGC 2024, this mon becomes reliable for all the most degenerate reasons. I've talked about Gengar a lot, so I'm gonna keep this short and simple because nothing has really changed other than its Smogon tiering placement. But while it may have dropped a tier, I think it's still a really good Pokemon all around. Nasty Plot and its good special attack and speed, as well as excellent options like Dazzling Gleam, Thunderbolt, Energy Ball, Shadow Ball, and Sludge Bomb, as well as various support options like Will-O-Wisp and Thunder Wave. With that said, while not the Titan he once was, I still firmly believe that Gengar is excellent. It would just be more excellent if they, I don't know, gave Levitate back. Recommended Terra, Dark, Fairy, Electric, and Grass are all good ones. In the context of the Smogon singles metagame, which I am more versed in than VGC, losing access to Spore in the current singles meta kinda tanks Amoonguss' viability a decent bit, and I don't know if it's gonna wind up being all that good anymore. So why is it being put above Gengar? Because I believe in it. I firmly believe that Regenerator and Toxic, as well as its solid bulk, plus access to stuff like Clear Smog, Foul Play, Synthesis, and Giga Drain will keep it in contention as a bulky Pokemon. The only thing is, I don't think it's gonna survive UU, given that a certain creature that is also a poison type with Regenerator lurks there nowadays, and I still do not know how it got there. But I think when it inevitably drops to RU, it'll most likely be one of the best mons in the tier. Recommended Terra? Good question. I think Water is the best option myself. Iron Moth is definitely good. It just isn't one of the best things ever anymore. It kind of competes with Volcarona, and Volcarona is considered to be just better than it. This doesn't mean Iron Moth isn't without things that set it apart though. Being able to use booster energy makes it automatically threatening without needing a turn to Quiver Dance. This ability to be immediately threatening makes it arguably harder to stop than Volcarona, who typically isn't the craziest until it Quiver Dances. And if you try to use Sucker Punch to stop Iron Moth, you risk letting it set up Substitute, which is something it sometimes runs, which makes it even harder to beat. Add Fiery Dance, Sludge Wave, and Terra Blast to the mix, and this Pokemon becomes very frightening very fast. Recommended Terra? Ground. We gotta destroy Heatran where it stands. Toxapex is a Pokemon that it feels strange putting anywhere below the top 5. However, I cannot deny that its competition is insanely good. And they're so good that they've managed to push it out of its OU status due to being somehow more useful than it. Obviously, Toxapex is not bad. Far from it. It's still a cornerstone of heavily dedicated stall teams, because it stalls like nothing else does. It is the stall Pokemon. The issue is that Toxapex isn't particularly good on anything else, and stall, while good, isn't the best right now, thanks to the insanely powerful threats that currently exist in the meta. Combine this with the fact that the other defensive poison types of Gen 9 have more to offer than it does, and it slowly begins to become apparent that, at the moment, Toxapex just isn't where you want to invest your stocks. With that said, rest in peace UU, because this thing is now in it, where I imagine both it and Garganacl are going to team up to annoy the tier to death. It being a one-dimensional wall just doesn't help it when its competition has so much more to it than it does, even if they aren't as bulky. Recommended Terra? Probably Fairy. So maybe it really is just a personal thing, but while I have grown to respect Glimmora more than I used to, and I understand why it's used over Toxapex, it's still hard for me to believe this Pokemon is truly better, even if this is where I have it placed. But as said prior, Toxapex suffers from competition, where Glimmora does not. I will give it the respect it is due, because despite the waves of power creep from the past DLCs, Glimmora has thrived as a Pokemon thanks to its incredibly unique attributes. It has Mortal Spin to remove hazards from its side of the field, access to Stealth Rock, which is one of the best moves in singles, and most importantly, its ability is stupid. Toxic Debris, being able to set toxic spikes upon being hit by any physical move, is harder to play around than it looks. And simply seeing it in Team Preview alongside Pokemon like Rabombi and Goldengo forces you to change how you approach a match, lest you find your entire team getting poisoned and easier to beat as a result. Speaking of competition for Toxapex, the first bit of that competition is Clodsire. Clodsire is a premier special wall, and while it doesn't have the physical bulk that Toxapex has, it has a lot more utility. Starting off, having to guess its ability makes it harder to play around on principle, as both Water Absorb and Unaware are incredibly good, and guessing wrong can outright lose you valuable momentum, either by using a boosted move into the Unaware variant, or using a water move into Water Absorb, both of which give Clodsire a free turn to use Toxic or Stealth Rock, all while putting you in a bad position. While there are ways to deduce which set Clodsire is running by looking at Team Preview, there's always a chance that you're just wrong. So remember how I said meta developments are important in deciding what does and doesn't get used? At the moment, Rain is popular again, and so is Raging Bolt. And Volcarona is around, and just as good as usual. Water Absorb Clodsire matches up well against Rain, and Unaware Clodsire can completely ruin Raging Bolt and Volcarona. It also matches up well against Heatran and Specs Dragapult. No matter what variation of Clodsire you're running, you're gonna match up well in this something relevant, and the rest of your team exists to cover what Clodsire doesn't match up well against. That's how team building works. Recommended Terra? Typically water or flying. Okay, so now that I've talked about where Clodsire succeeds, where Toxapex has failed, where does Galarian's Slowking fall into this? You know how Rain and Sun are popular right now? Well, not only do Rain and Sun have special attackers that a specially defensive Glowking can switch into, but Chilly Reception lets it not only pivot for momentum, but also completely change the weather. This forces Pokemon like Torkoal and Pelipper to have to switch back into it to reset it, both of which are notoriously weak to Stealth Rock. And if you're playing competitive singles, you're gonna have a Stealth Rocker. You see where I'm going with this? Even if it didn't have this quality, being able to defensively pivot while getting HP back with Regenerator is just good. But being able to manipulate the weather alongside that makes Glowking just that much better. Combine this with Thunder Wave to cripple enemies and Future Sight to force your opponent to poison themselves properly to play around it, and then Sludge Bomb to defeat the common Fairy type while shooting for poison chances. It's unbelievable how amazing this Pokemon is. Recommended Terra? I can tell you the most used ones are Water for being a defensive type, Dark to not lose the knockoff in Poltergeist, and Fairy to also not lose the knockoff, but also ripping dragons a new one at the same time. Speaking of dragons, Naganadel would probably ravage Gen 9 singles if it were in it. It may not beat Dragapult and King Gambit, as well as certain special walls, but it does excellently versus just about everything else in the tier. I was scrolling through OU, and I spotted more and more Pokemon that would fear Naganadel. Its excellent speed and special attack stat, along with access to stuff like Nasty Plot, Sludge Wave, Dracometeor, and Fire Blast, alongside Terra Blast in case it really needed it? Ha, no. Beast Boost is just the icing on the cake that makes Naganadel insanely good. If it did exist in Gen 9, the recommended Terra would be Ground. So Terra Ground Terra Blast could send a message to Heatran and the other bulky poisons. Terra into Fairy is also good for beating dragons and Kingambit Sucker Punch. Sneasler is just Sneasler. When partnered with any terrain setter and given a corresponding seed, no matter the terrain setter, Sneasler becomes such a stupid win condition that it becomes less funny and more depressing if you're on the other side of it. One Swords Dance is all it needs, and then Acrobatics, Dire Claw, and Close Combat do the rest without fail. Sometimes you replace Acrobatics for Lash Out to get the jump on Goldango, but that's literally it. Unburdened Sneasler has very few effective ways it can be dealt with. The Poison Touch and Pressure set feels gimmicky at best in comparison. Recommended Terra, Flying or Dark. Anyways, that's pretty much gonna wrap up this list. What'd you guys think? And what would you consider to be your favorite poison type? Also be sure to let me know which typing you want to see me cover next. With that said, hope you guys have a great day.